An MMA fighter, confident in his undefeated record, thought a royal guard would be an easy target. But one precise move changed everything, leaving him flat on the ground and the crowd in stunned silence. Here's what happened. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the royal guards that you won't want to miss. The summer heat bore down on the grounds of Buckingham Palace as Jace the Bull Hardin shouldered his way through the crowd of tourists, his muscled frame causing people to instinctively step aside. Standing at 6'2", with a fighter's build honed through years in the octagon, his presence commanded attention, though not the kind he imagined. "Look at this guy," Jace announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying the distinctive American accent of someone who thought volume equaled importance. "Standing there like a statue while real fighters are in the world." His eyes fixed on guard Graham Kingsley, whose perfect posture and unwavering focus seemed to personally offend Jace's professional sensibilities. Jace's sleeveless shirt displayed arms covered in tattoos, each one commemorating a victory in his undefeated MMA career. 15 wins, 12 by knockout, numbers he made sure everyone within earshot knew about as he moved closer to Kingsley's post. His championship belt, which he'd insisted on wearing over his shoulder for this tourist visit, caught the afternoon sun as he strutted. "You know what I see?" Jace circled Kingsley like a predator, though the guard's bearing suggested he was anything but prey. "I see someone who's never been in a real fight, never felt what it's like to face someone who can actually hit back." His voice carried the confident sneer of a man who measured worth in knockouts and submission holds. A young mother pulled her children back as Jace's pacing grew more aggressive. His reputation preceded him, the fighter who never stopped even when opponents tapped out, who had been suspended twice for unsportsmanlike conduct, whose victory celebrations often proved more violent than the fights themselves. "Hey, toy soldier!" Jace stopped directly in front of Kingsley, close enough that his breath disturbed the medals on the guard's immaculate uniform. "I've got more fights this month than you've had in your entire career playing dress-up." His eyes narrowed as he studied the guard's stoic expression. "What's wrong? Too scared to even look at a real warrior?" Two elderly men standing nearby exchanged knowing glances. Their bearing and the campaign medals on their blazers marked them as veterans, men who understood the difference between a fighter and a soldier. They watched silently as Jace continued his performance, their expressions suggesting they'd seen this type of bravado before and knew exactly how it usually ended. 15! And, oh baby! Jace shadow-boxed a few inches from Kingsley's face, his movements carrying the fluid precision of a trained fighter. "That means 15 guys tougher than you tried to stand their ground, and 15 times I put them down." He paused, a cruel smile playing across his face. "Wonder what would happen if someone decided to test those fancy moves you're not showing." Guard Kingsley remained motionless, but there was something in his bearing, a subtle tension visible only to those who knew what to look for, that spoke of years of real combat experience. Not the regulated violence of the octagon, but the kind of fighting that had actual stakes. His ceremonial rifle remained perfectly positioned, his posture unchanged, but the air around him had begun to crackle with potential energy. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Jace prepared to escalate his challenge. "Let me show you what a real fighter looks like," Jace announced, dropping into his signature fighting stance, mere feet from where Kingsley stood guard. The movement was fluid, practiced, the kind of technique that had earned him millions in prize money and a reputation as one of MMA's most ruthless competitors. "See this?" He threw a series of quick jabs into the air, each punch stopping just short of Kingsley's face. "This is what actual combat training looks like, not this." He gestured contemptuously at the guard's ceremonial rifle. "Toy soldier routine." The two veterans had drawn closer, their faces set in grim recognition of what was unfolding. The older of the two touched his campaign medals unconsciously. Decorations earned in conflicts where fighting wasn't about prize money or championship belts. "You know what the difference is between you and me," Jace continued, now circling Kingsley with the predatory grace that had become his trademark in the octagon. "I prove myself every time I step into the ring. Real combat, real consequences." He stopped directly in front of the guard again. "While you just stand here pretending to be something you're not." A small crowd had begun to gather, though they maintained a respectful distance. Parents guided their children away, recognizing the dangerous energy emanating from the fighter. His reputation for unpredictability had followed him out of the ring. The post-fight brawls, the broken bones after the bell, the suspensions that seemed to only fuel his aggression. "Let me demonstrate something," Jace announced, his voice carrying the same tone he used during pre-fight interviews. He began demonstrating his signature takedown move in slow motion, narrating each step with mocking precision. "This is how you dismantle someone who thinks standing still makes them strong. I've put 15 professional fighters on their backs with this exact sequence." The younger veteran shifted his weight, combat instincts from years of service telling him this was more than just showboating. His companion placed a steadying hand on his arm. They'd both seen enough real combat to know when a situation was about to escalate. "Nothing to say, soldier boy?" Jace's voice took on a harder edge as Kingsley's continued silence began to wear on his ego. "No comments about how your training would handle this." He executed another complex series of strikes in the air, each movement carrying the lethal precision that had made him infamous in the fighting world. Guard Kingsley remained motionless, but there was a new tension in his bearing. Not fear, but the coiled readiness of someone who had faced real threats. His eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect, but those who looked closely might have noticed his grip shift slightly on his ceremonial rifle. "You know what I think?" Jace's voice dropped lower, meant me just for Kingsley's ears. "I think all this ceremony, all this tradition you hide behind, it's just an excuse. An excuse to avoid proving yourself in real combat." He leaned closer, his next words carrying a challenge that had ended careers in the octagon. "Want to test that theory, soldier boy? Want to see what happens when your parade ground discipline meets someone who fights for a living?" The afternoon had grown quieter, the usual tourist chatter dying away as more people sensed the brewing confrontation. Even the palace pigeons seemed to have found elsewhere to be, leaving the scene set for whatever would unfold next. 15 fights, Jace's voice carried across the now hushed courtyard, and not one of those professional fighters lasted more than 2 rounds. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet now, the same way he did before a match, adrenaline clearly building in his system. But here you stand, probably never thrown a real punch in your life, acting like that uniform makes you untouchable. The older veteran leaned toward his companion, speaking just loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Royal Marines, he said, nodding toward Kingsley. Special operations, the kind of fighting that doesn't come with referee stoppages. Jace caught the comment and spun toward them, his face darkening. Special ops? Please. His laugh was sharp, dismissive. I've put 3 special forces guys on their backs in exhibition matches. All that tactical training. He threw another complex combination of punches into the air. Useless in a real fight. Guard Kingsley's eyes remained forward, but something in his bearing had shifted. An almost imperceptible change that the veterans recognized instantly. It was the same tension they'd felt in combat zones when a situation was about to go critical. You want to know what real combat looks like? Jace moved even closer to Kingsley, close enough that his next shadow-boxed combination stirred the air around the guard's medals. It looks like this! His movements were becoming faster, more aggressive, the controlled violence that had made him a champion now taking on a darker edge. A palace security officer had noticed the commotion and was speaking into his radio, but he maintained his distance. Something in Jace's bearing, the barely contained violence, the professional fighter's stance, made even trained security personnel wary of direct intervention. "Look at these medals!" Jace reached out as if to flick one of Kingsley's decorations, stopping just short of actual contact. "Probably got them for standing really, really still, right?" His voice dripped with contempt. "My medals? My belt? I earned those by breaking people who thought they were tough, by sending them to the hospital when they wouldn't submit." The younger veteran's hand had moved to his phone, but his companion shook his head slightly. They both recognized that this situation had moved beyond the point where outside intervention would help. This was now about something deeper than just a belligerent tourist. It was about two very different understandings of what combat truly meant. "Tell you what, soldier boy," Jace's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Why don't you step off your little parade square? Leave that toy gun behind. Let's see how your military discipline holds up against someone who fights for more than just ceremony." He demonstrated his infamous chokehold in the air. "This move, right here, sent 3 guys to the ICU. Referee couldn't stop me fast enough." Kingsley's continued silence seemed to infuriate Jace further. The fighter's face had taken on the same expression his opponents dreaded, the look that usually preceded his most violent octagon moments. "Still nothing to say?" Jace circled again, his movements becoming more predatory. "You know what we call guys like you in the fighting world? Props." He spat the word like venom. "Just props for real warriors to prove themselves against. And right now," his voice carried a new edge of decision, "right now, I'm thinking it's time for a live demonstration." The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the courtyard as Jace settled into his pre-fight stance. The crowd had grown larger but quieter, sensing they were about to witness something beyond the usual tourist provocations. The veterans exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen that look before, in places where combat wasn't about sport or entertainment, but survival. "Last chance, soldier boy," Jace announced, his muscles visibly tensing beneath his tattoos. "Show me something real, or I'm going to show everyone here what happens when ceremony meets actual combat." His hands had formed into fighting fists, his body coiling like a spring about to release. "Because right now, I'm thinking it's time to add another highlight to my knockout reel." "Time to find out what's behind all this ceremony," Jace declared, his voice carrying the same tone he used before his most brutal victories. His feet shifted into the stance that had preceded 15 professional knockouts, each movement calculated and precise. The veterans recognized the change instantly. The switch from threatening to acting. The younger one muttered under his breath, "He's actually going to..." But before he could finish, Jace exploded into motion. Years of professional fighting had made Jace's takedown attempts nearly impossible to defend against. His signature move started with a lightning-fast level change, followed by an explosive drive that had put multiple champions on their backs. The speed and power that had earned him the nickname The Bull were on full display as he launched himself at guard Kingsley. Time seemed to slow as Jace's shoulder drove toward Kingsley's midsection, the same technique that had ended his last 5 fights in under a minute. The crowd's collective gasp created a vacuum of sound, as if all of London held its breath. Some tourists instinctively raised their phones, then thought better of it, realizing that they were about to witness something beyond a simple social media moment. But Jace had made a critical miscalculation. The guard he was attempting to take down wasn't a ring fighter bound by rules and referees. Graham Kingsley had earned his position through years of actual combat, where fights didn't end with bells or submissions. Just before impact, something changed in Kingsley's bearing, a shift so subtle that only the veterans noticed it. His ceremonial stance melted away, replaced by the combat-ready posture of a special operations veteran. The rifle, which Jace had dismissed as a prop, was about to prove its worth in trained hands. "Big mistake," the older veteran muttered, recognizing what was about to unfold. His companion nodded grimly, both men understanding that Jace was about to learn the difference between sport fighting and military combat in the most direct way possible. In the split second before Jace's takedown attempt connected, guard Kingsley's eyes finally moved, snapping to his target with the focused intensity of a predator. His white-gloved hands shifted on his rifle with practiced precision, years of close-quarters combat training taking over with mechanical efficiency. Jace's confident smirk lasted only until the moment of impact, when his supposedly easy target transformed into something his octagon experience hadn't prepared him for. The afternoon sun caught the brass buttons of Kingsley's uniform one last time as ceremony gave way to combat reality. "Now you'll learn," Kingsley spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had faced real battles. His words were not a taunt or a threat, just a simple statement of fact. The ceremonial guard was gone, replaced by the special operations veteran who had earned every medal on his chest in actual combat. The courtyard fell absolutely silent as Jace's attempted takedown met military countermeasures. The next few seconds would demonstrate, with painful clarity, the difference between fighting for sport and fighting for survival. Kingsley's response would teach Jace, and everyone watching, why you don't mistake ceremonial duty for military weakness. As Jace committed fully to his attack, the last thing he saw was Kingsley's eyes, not filled with fear or anger, but with the cold calculation of someone who had fought in places where rules didn't exist and referee stoppages weren't an option. The MMA champion was about to learn that some lessons come at a much higher price than losing a title belt. The sound of the first impact echoed off the palace walls like a thunderclap, marking the moment when showmanship met genuine combat experience. The ceremonial rifle in Kingsley's hands transformed from a symbol of tradition to a tactical instrument with devastating efficiency. As Jace's takedown attempt met the guard's defense, the MMA fighter learned his first lesson about real combat. Sport fighting follows rules, survival doesn't. Using his rifle as a lever, Kingsley redirected Jace's momentum with the precise skill of someone who had done this under actual fire. The movement was smooth, economical, and brutally effective. Jace's own force became his undoing as he found himself suddenly airborne, his practiced technique rendered useless against military combat expertise. 15 fights? Kingsley's voice remained calm as Jace crashed hard onto the courtyard stones. Try 15 months in active combat zones. The guard's movements were nothing like the showy techniques Jace had demonstrated earlier. Each motion was minimal, precise, and devastatingly effective, the kind of efficiency that came from fighting where mistakes meant more than lost matches. Jace scrambled to his feet, his professional fighter's instincts kicking in. He launched a combination that had won him his last championship, a series of strikes that should have overwhelmed any opponent. But Kingsley wasn't fighting for points or submission. His response was immediate and decisive. The rifle spun in Kingsley's hands with practiced precision, its wooden stock deflecting Jace's punches with mechanical efficiency. Each block was followed by a counter that sent shockwaves through the fighter's trained muscles. The veterans watching nodded in grim recognition. This wasn't ceremonial drilling. This was combat muscle memory earned in real firefights. "What's wrong, champion?" Kingsley's voice carried no mockery, just the steady authority of someone who had faced real threats. No referee to call breaks, no rules to hide behind. His next movement sent Jace staggering backward, professional stance forgotten. Jace's face contorted with rage and disbelief. He charged again, throwing the same combination that had put 3 men in the hospital. But Kingsley's response showed why military combat training existed in a different realm than sport fighting. The guard's counterattack was precise, measured, and completely overwhelming. In the ring, Kingsley spoke between movements, each word punctuated by another defensive masterclass. You fight for prizes. In combat, the rifle's stock connected with Jace's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. We fight for survival. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the MMA champion's attacks were systematically dismantled. Each of Jace's professional techniques was met with battlefield-tested counters. His speed meant nothing against Kingsley's economy of motion. His power found no purchase against military precision. All those knockouts, Kingsley continued, his voice steady despite the intense physical exchange. All those submissions, they taught you how to fight in a controlled environment. Another shift of the rifle sent Jace sprawling. This isn't the octagon. This is what real combat looks like. The older veteran leaned toward his companion. Royal Marines close combat instructor, he murmured, trained special forces in hand to hand. The lad never stood a chance. Jace's frustration mounted, as none of his championship-winning moves had their usual effect. Each attack was turned against him, with the kind of precision that only came from actual battlefield experience. His professional fighting career had taught him to dominate opponents. It hadn't prepared him for facing someone who had fought for actual survival. Your technique is impressive, Kingsley acknowledged, as he deflected another of Jace's increasingly desperate attacks. But it's designed for sport, for show. The rifle moved like an extension of his body, each motion born from years of real-world application. This is how we fight when there are no medals on the line, when it's life or death. With one final decisive movement, Kingsley ended the confrontation. The rifle swept Jace's legs from under him, while simultaneously controlling his descent. The MMA fighter hit the courtyard stones hard enough to drive the last breath from his lungs, pinned by the same ceremonial weapon he had mocked earlier. 15 wins in the octagon, Kingsley stated, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. Impressive. But this uniform represents centuries of actual combat experience. These medals, he nodded toward his chest decorations, earned in places where fighting isn't about entertainment. It's about survival. The guard's white gloves remained pristine, his uniform unruffled, as he stepped back from the fallen fighter. The only sign that anything had happened was a slight scuff on one of his polished boots, a mark that would be buffed out before his next ceremonial duty. Jace rolled onto his side. His professional fighter's pride hurt far more than his body. Palace security had finally moved in, but their presence was almost superfluous now. The lesson had already been delivered with military precision. This isn't over, Jace snarled as he pushed himself to his feet, his championship belt lying forgotten on the courtyard stones. In the ring, with real rules. You still don't understand, Kingsley cut him off, already resuming his ceremonial stance. This was never about fighting. It was about respect, something no amount of championship belts can teach you. The security officers moved to escort Jace away, but his ego wouldn't allow him to leave quietly. You got lucky, he shouted, struggling against their grip. One-on-one, no weapons, You'd what? The older veteran interrupted, stepping forward. Learn the same lesson again. His campaign medals caught the fading sunlight. That young man has fought in places where your octagon rules would get you killed in seconds. Count yourself fortunate, he showed restraint. Jace spat on the ground, his former confidence shattered, but his arrogance intact. All this ceremony, all this tradition, it's still just for show. In a real fight. You just experienced a real fight, the younger veteran interjected. The difference is, he fights to protect something greater than his own ego. Remember that the next time you mistake ceremony for weakness. As the security officers led Jace away, his angry protests echoing off the palace walls, Guard Kingsley had already returned to his post. His posture was once again ceremonial perfection, eyes forward, bearing unchanged. The only evidence of the confrontation was a single scuff mark on his boot, a temporary blemish on an otherwise immaculate uniform. The crowd began to disperse, their phones remarkably absent. Somehow, recording this moment would have felt like diminishing its significance. Parents led their children away, quietly explaining the difference between a fighter and a warrior. Tourists resumed their photos, but now with a new respect for the figure standing guard. Jace's championship belt remained where it had fallen until one of the security officers retrieved it. As they led him toward their waiting vehicle, his final shouts carried more wounded pride than actual threat. "This isn't how real fighting works, in my world." "That's exactly the point," the older veteran remarked to no one in particular. "His world has rules, referees, and rewards. The real world of combat?" He touched his medals again. "It teaches you that true strength isn't about winning fights. It's about standing for something worth fighting for." Guard Kingsley maintained his watch as the sun began to set over Buckingham Palace. His ceremonial duty continued, unchanged by the incident. A living reminder that beneath the pageantry and tradition lay the steel core of real military capability. The scuff on his boot would be gone by tomorrow's guard mount, polished away during hours of preparation. But the lesson he'd delivered would linger far longer. A powerful reminder that ceremony and capability aren't mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are those who don't feel the need to advertise their skills. What would you have done in Guard Kingsley's position? How long would you have maintained composure in the face of such disrespect? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And here's something to consider. When was the last time you witnessed someone mistake ceremony for weakness? How did that situation unfold? Don't forget to like and share it with someone who appreciates the true meaning of discipline and respect. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the Royal Guards who stand as living symbols of dignity and duty. Press that bell icon to never miss an upload. You won't want to miss our next story about another encounter between a royal guard and someone who learned that respect isn't just about physical strength. It's about understanding the weight of tradition and honor. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now. Each one offers a unique perspective on what it truly means to stand guard